The air inside Grayson and Company Enterprises buzzed with the usual tension of a corporate Monday morning. The sound of clicking keyboards, ringing phones, and hushed conversations created a symphony of productivity. The scent of freshly brewed coffee lingered, mingling with the crisp scent of paper and expensive cologne. At the heart of the open office space sat Leonard Grayson, the man who owned it all. Tall, broad-shouldered, and draped in an expensive charcoal suit, he exuded power. His piercing blue eyes scanned the applicants' resumes in front of him with mild boredom, occasionally smirking as he leaned back in his leather chair. "Next," he called, flipping to the next file in his hand. The door to his office creaked open, and in walked Jamal Carter, a young black man, early 30s, wearing a neatly pressed navy blue suit, his shoulders squared, his walk confident, but not arrogant. He carried himself with the quiet assurance of a man who had earned his place, though he knew all too well that in rooms like these, confidence alone was never enough. Grayson barely glanced up. His eyes flickered across Jamal's face, then down to his outstretched hand. He didn't bother shaking it. Jamal noticed the way Grayson's lips curled, as if suppressing a chuckle. The disdain was subtle but unmistakable. "You're here for the senior analyst position?" Grayson asked, his tone dripping with skepticism. "That's correct," Jamal replied evenly. He had been in situations like this before. He had faced the silent judgments, the raised eyebrows, the unspoken, "Are you sure you belong here?" But he was used to it. He had come prepared. Grayson exhaled through his nose, shaking his head slightly as he finally took a proper look at Jamal's resume. The moment his eyes landed on the page, however, his expression froze. Silence. For the first time in years, Leonard Grayson, CEO, businessman, untouchable ruler of his domain, was speechless. The smirk evaporated. The condescending gleam in his eyes dulled into something else, something resembling disbelief. Jamal Carter wasn't just any applicant. His credentials were extraordinary. Harvard graduate, former lead strategist for a Fortune 500 company, published research in economic journals. His list of accomplishments outshined everyone in that waiting room, possibly everyone in the building. Grayson swallowed hard, his fingers tightening around the paper. He looked up at Jamal, this time really looking at him, past the color of his skin, past his assumptions, past whatever quiet prejudice had clouded his judgment just moments ago. Jamal didn't break eye contact. He didn't need to say a word. The resume spoke for itself. And at that moment, Leonard Grayson realized something. He had completely underestimated the man in front of him. A man with two realities. Jamal Carter was used to walking into rooms where people underestimated him. It had been that way since childhood. He was raised in the heart of Atlanta, in a neighborhood where dreams were often crushed before they had the chance to take flight. His mother, a schoolteacher, worked tirelessly to keep food on the table. His father, once a sharp-minded entrepreneur, had been swallowed by a justice system that never gave him a second chance. Despite the struggles, Jamal was different. His mother always told him, "If they won't give you a seat at the table, build your own." And so he did. He worked harder, read more, stayed up later than anyone he knew. When his classmates were out partying, he was memorizing economic theories. When others said, "That's impossible," Jamal saw a challenge. By the time he walked across the stage at Harvard, diploma in hand, he had already shattered the expectations society had placed on him. He had landed top internships, earned accolades, and gained respect in rooms where he was often the only black man present. But respect was never given freely. No matter how many titles he collected, how many deals he closed, or how many speeches he gave, there were always men like Leonard Grayson, men who saw his skin before his skill. And today, Jamal was prepared to prove, yet again, that he belonged. The man who thought he owned the world. Leonard Grayson wasn't just any businessman. He was the embodiment of privilege, born into a legacy of wealth. He had never known struggle. His father had built Grayson and Company, enterprises from the ground up, turning it into a powerhouse of financial influence. By the time Leonard took over, the company was a machine that practically ran itself. Everything had always come easy to him: money, power, success. He surrounded himself with people who looked like him, thought like him, and never challenged him. To Grayson, life was simple. People like him ruled, and people like Jamal took orders. So, when he first saw Jamal walk into his office, he had already made up his mind about him. Another overconfident applicant, another ambitious man reaching for something out of his league. But that resume changed everything. As he read through Jamal's achievements, a cold realization crept over him. This man wasn't just qualified, he was overqualified. Jamal's credentials made the other applicants look like amateurs. If this had been any other candidate, someone who fit the mold, Grayson would have hired him on the spot. Instead, he felt something unexpected. A threat. The room where it happened, the office was silent, save for the ticking of the clock on the wall. Grayson tapped his fingers against the desk, his mind racing. He could feel the weight of Jamal's steady gaze, waiting, unshaken, unbothered. "So," Grayson finally said, leaning back in his chair, "you've got an impressive background." Jamal gave a slight nod. "I've worked hard for it." Grayson smirked, trying to regain control of the conversation. "Harvard, Fortune 500 company, published work. Tell me, why do you want to work here?" It was a test, a trap even. Grayson wanted to hear Jamal stumble, wanted a reason to dismiss him. But Jamal didn't flinch. "Because I don't just want a job," he said. "I want a challenge." Grayson raised an eyebrow. "A challenge?" Jamal folded his hands together, keeping his tone even. "Your firm has been struggling with market forecasting. Your last two major investments underperformed, and your analysts have missed key trends in emerging markets. I've studied your company's financial reports. I know exactly where you're falling short, and I know how to fix it." Grayson's smirk faded. Nobody spoke to him like that. The power dynamic in the room shifted. Jamal wasn't just asking for a position. He was proving that Grayson needed him more than he needed this job. For the first time in his career, Leonard Grayson felt outmatched. The unspoken war. Grayson could feel the pressure mounting. He had two options: hire Jamal and acknowledge that he was the best candidate, reject him and maintain the illusion of control. If it had been anyone else, anyone who fit the mold, Grayson would have snapped them up in an instant. But hiring Jamal Carter meant admitting that the very ideas he had built his world around were flawed. That talent didn't always come in the form he expected. That maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as powerful as he thought. Grayson cleared his throat. "I'll be in touch." Jamal didn't miss a beat. He rose, shook Grayson's reluctant hand, and turned to leave. But before he reached the door, he paused. "Mr. Grayson," he said, glancing over his shoulder, "I know what you're thinking, but talent speaks for itself. I'll be waiting for your call." And with that, Jamal walked out, not just of the office, but out of Grayson's carefully built reality. For the first time in years, Leonard Grayson sat alone, questioning everything. A decision that should have been easy. Leonard Grayson prided himself on his decisiveness. He built his company on gut instincts. He knew which stocks would rise, which investments were doomed, and which people belonged in his boardroom. But now, for the first time in a long time, he hesitated. Jamal Carter's resume was undeniable. His achievements, his expertise, on paper. He was not just the best candidate, but the best they'd ever had. Any other hiring manager would have signed him on the spot. But Grayson couldn't shake the gnawing feeling in his gut. There was something about Jamal. The way he carried himself. The way he didn't bow to the unspoken hierarchy. That bothered him. Grayson wasn't used to men like Jamal walking into his office like they belonged there. And he especially wasn't used to them telling him what his company was doing wrong. He steepled his fingers, staring at the resume on his desk before reaching for the intercom. "Send in the next applicant." A laugh that said everything. An hour later, William Crawford sat across from Grayson. Unlike Jamal, William fit the image Grayson was used to, a tall, blonde, Ivy League graduate with an easy confidence. His resume, decent, but next to Jamal's, it was laughable. And yet, after 15 minutes of pleasant conversation, Grayson found himself leaning back, smiling. "This all looks good, William," he said, as if they both didn't know he was about to hand him a job he hadn't earned. Then, as an afterthought, he chuckled. "You won't believe well supplied today." William leaned forward, curious. Grayson tapped Jamal's resume with his index finger. "This guy, Jamal Carter, black guy, Harvard grad, thought he was the smartest man in the room. William smirked. Did he now? Oh yeah. Grayson let out a dry laugh. He even tried to tell me how to run my own company. William laughed with him, shaking his head. They both knew the unspoken truth. Jamal was better, but that didn't matter. What mattered was who fit the image of success and who didn't. Grayson closed the folder with a satisfied smirk. Decision made. An email that changed everything. Jamal Carter was used to rejection. He had seen it in the way teachers once assumed he wasn't gifted. He had seen it in the way landlords hesitated before handing over a lease. He had seen it in the way clients second-guessed his strategies, only to later realize he had been right all along. So, when he saw the email from Grayson and Company, he already knew. Dear Mr. Carter, thank you for your application. While we were impressed with your credentials, we have decided to move forward with another candidate at this time. Jamal stared at the screen. He wasn't surprised, but he was angry. Not because he had lost the job, because he knew why. A deep breath, then another. He could already hear his mother's voice in his head. If they won't give you a seat at the table, build your own. Jamal closed his laptop, and then he made a call. The nightmare Grayson never saw coming. It started as a normal morning. Grayson arrived at the office, sipping his expensive coffee, glancing over the market reports, expecting another predictable day. Then his assistant burst in, face pale. Sir, she said, breathless, we have a situation. Grayson frowned. What kind of situation? She swallowed hard. Jamal Carter. Grayson stiffened. What about him? She placed a tablet on his desk and pressed play. A video. A viral one. Jamal Carter, sitting across from an interviewer, recounting his experience at Grayson and Company. I knew I was the most qualified candidate, Jamal was saying. I knew I had more experience, more credentials, more results. But in that office, my resume didn't matter. My talent didn't matter. What mattered was that I didn't look like the people they usually hire. Grayson's stomach dropped. The interviewer leaned in. Are you saying you were discriminated against? Jamal didn't hesitate. I'm saying there are men in power who would rather lose money than admit someone like me is better than them. Grayson's fingers tightened around his coffee cup, and that was only the beginning. The internet doesn't forget. The comments were brutal. Another racist CEO exposed. Who's surprised? Boycott Grayson and Company until they explain this. Jamal Carter was overqualified and still got rejected? Make it make sense. This is why we need more diversity in leadership. Good OL Boys Club strikes again. Within hours, the hashtag Boycott Grayson Co. was trending. Investors started pulling out. Clients were asking questions. Employees were whispering. For the first time in his career, Leonard Grayson wasn't the one holding the power, and he was about to learn. Actions have consequences. Leonard Grayson had been at the top for so long that he never once considered what a fall might feel like. But today, as he stood in his sprawling corner office, his sanctuary, his throne, it felt smaller than ever. He loosened his tie and took a long, slow breath. His desk was cluttered with papers, his phone vibrating every few seconds with urgent messages. The headlines weren't slowing down. Grayson and Company faces backlash for discriminatory hiring practices. Exposed, the CEO who laughed at a black Harvard graduate. Hashtag Boycott Grayson Co. goes viral as stocks plummet. Every article, every post, every news segment was like a fresh wound, bleeding his reputation dry. The walls were closing in. By midday, the phone call started. By 1 p.m., the investors panicked. By 3 p.m., 2 of Grayson and Company's biggest clients terminated contracts. And then, at 4 p.m., the boardroom meeting began. Grayson walked into the sleek, glass-walled conference room, his signature arrogance still intact. But the moment he saw the board members' faces, he felt something he never had before. Doubt. They weren't looking at him for leadership. They were looking at him like a liability. Franklin Wells, a senior board member, cleared his throat. Leonard, we need to discuss the damage. Grayson scoffed. Damage? Social media outrage? It'll pass. Franklin didn't blink. Nike just pulled their partnership. The room went silent. For the first time. The weight of the situation crushed down on him. This wasn't just outrage. This was a reckoning. Jamal never expected the story to explode like this. He had spent years being invisible in corporate America, overlooked, underestimated. But now, everyone was listening. He scrolled through his phone. Job offers, interview requests, support from people all over the world. And then, an unknown number flashed on his screen. He hesitated before answering. "Hello." A calm, professional voice responded. "Mr. Carter, this is Diane Reynolds from CBS. We'd like to do an exclusive interview with you." Jamal's grip tightened on his phone. This was it. The moment that would change everything. Back in his office, Grayson's team was scrambling. The PR crisis was a wildfire, and no amount of press statements or damage control could put it out. "Sir," Meredith, his assistant, said nervously, "we need a public apology." Grayson exhaled sharply. "Fine, draft something." Within 30 minutes, his PR team put together a statement. "At Grayson and Company, we deeply value diversity and inclusion. We regret any misunderstanding and will take immediate action to review our hiring policies. We are committed to creating an equitable workplace for all." It was weak. It was corporate. It was nothing. And the world saw right through it. Social media exploded again. "Grayson isn't sorry. He's sorry he got caught." Where was this energy when he laughed in Jamal's face? Boycott still stands. Do not support this company. His pulse quickened. This wasn't working. They needed something bigger. And so, as a last-ditch effort, his team reached out to Jamal. A private email was sent offering a formal public apology, a monetary settlement, a job offer with a six-figure salary. Jamal stared at the email for a long time, and then he deleted it. This wasn't about a paycheck. This was about principle. The next night, Jamal Carter sat down with CBS News. Millions watched as he told his story, his truth. He spoke about the years of hard work that led him to that moment. He described Grayson's laughter, the humiliation, the sting of rejection, not because he wasn't qualified, but because of his skin color. And then, he said the words that sent a shockwave across the nation. "Grayson didn't reject me because I wasn't good enough. He rejected me because he knew I was." The internet erupted. The video clips spread like wildfire. Celebrities, news anchors, CEOs, politicians, everyone weighed in. And Grayson, for the first time in his life, he was powerless. The next 72 hours were a disaster for Grayson and Company. Multiple brands severed ties. Stock prices plummeted. Protesters gathered outside corporate offices. And then came the final blow. The board members called for an emergency meeting. Grayson stormed into the conference room, but this time, the energy was different. Franklin Wells looked at him with zero emotion. "Leonard," he said calmly, "we're voting to remove you as CEO." Grayson froze. His mind screamed in awe. This was his company, his legacy, his empire, but the votes were cast. And just like that, Leonard Grayson was out. Days later, as Grayson's empire burned, Jamal sat in a new office. A job offer had come from a company that valued him, a company that saw his worth. And as he looked out the window at the city skyline, he knew one thing for certain. Grayson had tried to erase him, but now, the world would never forget his name. The sun was setting over the city, casting a golden glow through the skyscrapers, but Leonard Grayson wasn't watching. He sat in his now empty office, staring at the polished mahogany desk where his name had been engraved for over a decade. The plaque was gone. The walls were bare. The empire he had built, gone in a matter of days. His phone, once a lifeline to power and prestige, now sat silent. No calls from investors. No emails from board members. Only the echoes of his own downfall. Then, a news alert flashed across the screen. Jamal Carter named head of diversity and inclusion for Horizon Tech. Grayson clenched his jaw. Horizon Tech, one of the biggest firms in the country, a direct competitor of what used to be his company, had just given Jamal a leadership role. The irony was suffocating. He read further. Carter, a Harvard graduate with years of experience in business strategy and innovation, was rejected by Grayson and Company under controversial circumstances. His hiring at Horizon Tech is being praised as a step toward corporate accountability and progress. Progress. That word stung more than he expected. He scrolled further. There was a video attached. With hesitation, he pressed play. The screen lit up with Jamal Carter, seated in a crisp navy suit, speaking to a panel of interviewers. His voice was steady, powerful, confident in a way that sent a chill down Grayson's spine. "I was never looking for revenge," Jamal said. "I just wanted to be seen for my work, my intelligence, my experience, not my skin color." He paused, and I think that's what true leadership is, creating spaces where people aren't defined by outdated biases, but by what they bring to the table. The interview continued, but Grayson had heard enough. He turned off the phone and sat in silence. For the first time, he wasn't angry. He wasn't plotting a comeback or crafting an excuse. For the first time, he was ashamed. Jamal sat in his new office, taking it all in. A fresh start. A company that valued him. A position where his voice mattered. But even with all of this, he couldn't shake the weight of the past few weeks. The emails, the interviews, the messages of support, they had been overwhelming. He had become a symbol, a movement, a message. But he was still just a man. A man who had walked into a job interview with nothing but ambition in his heart, only to be laughed at. A man who had been forced to prove his worth to a world that should have already seen it. A man who, despite winning, still carried the scars of the battle. Jamal took a deep breath. This was his moment to decide. Would he move forward and leave the past behind? Or would he take this opportunity to change the system that had tried to break him? He picked up the phone and made a call. "Mr. Wells, I'd like to discuss something important." A pause. Then Franklin Wells' voice came through. "I'm listening." Jamal stared out the window, his reflection faintly visible against the backdrop of the city. He had fought so hard for this moment, but victory had a strange taste, one that didn't come with the pure satisfaction he had imagined. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "I heard about your offer. Are you serious?" Jamal's lips curled into a small smile. There was no name, but he didn't need one. He typed back, "I don't make offers I don't intend to keep." A long pause. Then another message. "Let's talk." Jamal locked his phone and leaned back in his chair. The cafe was quiet, the kind of place meant for serious conversations. Jamal chose a table near the back, watching as Leonard Grayson walked in, looking like a man who had aged 10 years in a matter of weeks. Gone was the arrogance, the effortless confidence. He was no longer the king of an empire. He was a man who had lost everything. Grayson sat across from Jamal, tapping his fingers against the table. "I don't get it," he admitted. "You could have walked away. You could have let me rot. Why offer me this?" Jamal took a slow sip of his coffee before answering. "Because I believe people can change. I believe you can change." Grayson let out a bitter laugh. "You think I deserve a second chance?" Jamal shook his head. "No, but I think you need one." Silence stretched between them. "You want me to teach companies about bias?" Grayson scoffed. "I'm the last person who should be doing that." "Or the first," Jamal countered. "Because you were the problem. You were the system. And if a man like you could admit that, if you can face the world and say, 'I was wrong,' that's a message more powerful than any policy change." Grayson exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. "And what if I say no?" Jamal shrugged. "Then you keep running. You keep hiding. You keep being the man who threw everything away because of his own prejudice." He leaned forward. "Or you stand up and do something with what's left of your name." Grayson was quiet for a long time. Then finally he nodded. "I'll do it." Jamal extended a hand. "Then let's get to work." Grayson hesitated, then, for the first time, shook hands with the man he once laughed at. Months later, Jamal stood at a corporate leadership conference, speaking to a packed auditorium. Screens projected his image, and thousands of eyes watched, waiting to hear what he had to say. He took a deep breath. "I walked into an interview once, prepared, qualified, ready. But before I even spoke, the decision had already been made." Murmurs rippled through the audience. That moment could have broken me. It could have made me bitter. But instead, it fueled me. And today, I stand here not as someone seeking revenge, but as someone demanding change. A pause. Because true power isn't about tearing others down. It's about building something better. And today, we have a choice to be better. The applause started slowly, then grew into a standing ovation. Jamal looked out over the crowd and spotted a familiar face, Leonard Grayson, sitting quietly in the back. He wasn't clapping, but he was listening, and that, Jamal knew, was enough. Moral of the story: redemption is not given, it's earned. True power isn't in holding others back, but in lifting them up. And real change doesn't happen when we destroy our enemies. It happens when we turn them into allies.